BassEdge Radio. You're listening to The Edge, everything bass fishing, coming to you worldwide from Megaware KeelGuard Studios.
Here we go, BassEdge Nation. We got a big weekend coming up. It is Independence Weekend, Aaron. I'm excited. We got a great show coming, and we are full-fledged summer. We're past the solstice. I mean, things are hopping right now in the world.
They are, and quite honestly, Kurt, I'm kind of shocked that you didn't have, the noise of fireworks and that going off and wherever you are in the world right now. It probably would not bode well in your hotel room / camper or whatever abode you find yourself in. But we do have a great episode, great weekend, and of course, all things BassEdge from day one, presented by Megaware KeelGuard. Be sure, if you have not done so, log on to KeelGuard.com. You've got the Scuff Buster Skate Guard, Flex Step, and of course the first do-it-yourself keel protector. Put on the protection the pros pick, and that is KeelGuard.com. Kurt, we've had, speaking of kind of fireworks, hey,
yes,
classic, right? Bassmaster's Classic, Hank Cherry. You've got, probably the GOAT, Van Dam, coming back. He posted the big V, right?
Yeah, man. A lot of things going on. Congrats, as you mentioned, Aaron, to Hank Cherry, back-to-back Classic champs. I believe this is the now fourth time that this has occurred in BASS history. You got the Clun days way back. You've got Kevin Van Dam. I believe he was back-to-back. Jordan Lee went back-to-back. Now Hank Cherry has gone back-to-back as Classic champion. Very interesting tournament. A lot going on there. We're actually going to tackle a little bit of that later on in the show, talking about some high water situations. We've seen a lot of that. I know, Aaron, you've seen a lot of that. What we did not see at Chickamauga was high water. What we did see was the KVD smackdown.
That's for sure.
It was right back into the old school KVD offshore ledge fishing, doing what he does best. Stayed in a great position throughout the entire Bass Pro Tour event there on Chickamauga. Then in the final period, just laid the wood to him. I mean, it was a KVD show of years past, essentially, is what we saw.
Yeah, for all those who thought that, he might be losing his edge, perhaps, not so much.
Yeah, not so much. He hasn't had the greatest of finishes, over the last several years that we're accustomed to. Let me just say, I would take those finishes all day long.
Yeah, I was going to say that's relative, right?
Yeah, 100% relative. Talking about the GOAT here, and he's back on top for right now, so it'll be good to see how things boil down for him. Can he ride the momentum at St. Lawrence? He's had an Elite Series win at the St. Lawrence, going back to the St. Lawrence as a BBT, going at a different time of year, obviously. I think still a lot of fish going to be on bed there, so that's going to be an interesting scenario for this catch, weigh, release format and how that dials in for those guys up there on the St. Lawrence River. But without further ado, Aaron, we're going to dial in this little segment we always do in every episode. Probably one of my favorite segments, a quick tip brought to us by ProtectTheHarvest.com. Y'all listen in. Here's another bass fishing tip that you need to know. This episode's ProtectTheHarvest.com tackle tip with BASS Elite Series Pro, KJ Queen.
Hey guys, it's getting July. It's getting a little hot. And, it's getting that northern swing time. Go up north, catch some big smallmouth. One of the tackle tips that I want to give y'all that I like to do is I'd like to get a 7-1 medium heavy Janko high roller rod and get a high speed 8-2 gear ratio reel and put probably either 10 or 12 pound fluorocarbon and get a Queen Tackle peanut jig. And that's one of the cool products that me and my dad actually just come out with. Queen Tackle is a finesse peanut jig. And what's cool about this peanut jig, it has a 3/0 and a 4/0 hook in it, which is a very small, thin wire finesse hook. These jigs, they have a nice little round head to them, and they're hand-tied, wire-tied, have coffee scent as well. So when them smallmouth go up to it, they smell it. They're going to go ahead and they're going to eat it. And what's sweet is you can take these jigs, take half the skirt and lay it out, and trim half the skirt in half, the first half of the skirt over the head in half, and then take the other half of the skirt and trim it right behind the hook. And then when you fold it back up, it leaves it for a perfect little round ball jig, and it makes it match just perfect like a goby. And we also actually make these two colors called Summer Goby and Goby, and it matches literally a goby. You can't beat it. It matches it perfectly. And, I'm really excited about this northern swing going up there. And I'm, Champlain and St. Lawrence, best believe I'm going to have me a 7-1 medium heavy rod with a 10-pound test and a summer goby and a regular goby peanut jig tied on for sure. And, whenever I'm fishing, if I'm fishing out in, say, 20 foot of water or, even out to 25, I'm probably going to use that 3/8 ounce peanut jig. If I'm fishing anywhere between 20 foot or less, I like using that 1/4 ounce peanut jig. But the reason why I like that 1/4 ounce is because most people, if you think about what most people throw, even around where I live in North Carolina, everybody and their brother throws a 3/8 ounce or a 1/2 ounce jig. That's just standard. That's what everybody likes to throw. So I like throwing that 1/4 ounce jig. I'll take it, trim it up, make it really small, make a small profile, and I can throw that jig around in places that everybody else is throwing their jig, and I can get a few extra bites. And that's the key in making it on the Elite Series for me, and hopefully that'll help y'all out too as well.
KJ, awesome tip, man. Appreciate you sharing that with us. Brought to you by ProtectTheHarvest.com.
First by land and now by sea. For years, Lucas Oil has been a staple in high-performance vehicles on both the road and track. Now, from the makers of Lucas Oil comes Lucas Marine products, specifically engineered for marine applications. Protect and lubricate your marine inboard, outboard, or high-performance boat with Lucas Marine Engine Oil or Lucas Synthetic-Based Oil. Learn more about the complete line of Lucas Oil and marine products. Visit lucasoil.com.
Nitro Performance Bass Boats. Get pro-level performance with the Nitro Z18, the official boat of Major League Fishing. The Z18, with its nimble handling and versatility, sports many of the features in the larger boats in the line, like a Guardian Live Well, a heavily insulated cooler, dual 8-foot rod storage, and our smooth and fast NVT hull. Every Nitro boat is laid out to do one thing very well: catch fish. Enormous front decks, up to 45 square feet on the Z21, allow maximum mobility when battling unruly bass, and feature low-profile gunnels for ease of skipping, pitching, flipping, or landing fish. Nitro Performance Bass Boats, pure fishing machines.
Aaron, coming off the home pond in my last event just a short week or so ago, and not the result I wanted, but nonetheless a great result for fans of bass fishing.
Yeah, well, speaking of home pond, I don't think this angler has a home pond because he had to cross a very large pond to even get over here to be able to do this 5,000 to 6,000 miles. And of course, I'm referring to the first European winner, I guess, on the elite
National
level.
Tours.
Yeah, national tours.
Yeah. Man, unbelievable. Jacopo Galelli, just a monster day. Biggest bag by about 3 pounds. And the last day of the event on the Potomac River, took the title, an Italian angler. I got to tell you a quick story about this, Aaron. I actually met Jacopo Galelli many, many years ago. I believe it was 2012 or 13. So almost 8 years ago. He came here from Italy. I was fishing the BASS Open down at Harris Chain with a friend of mine, Paul Pagnato. We were staying in a typical fisherman's lodge, getting ready for the tournament, and there was this Italian guy, Jacopo, and listen to his story and what he was trying to do and fish, and we've seen other European anglers have success, not necessarily European, but other anglers have success from other countries here in the U.S., coming to bass fish and fish the big shows, whether it was at that time, the FLW Tour or the Bassmaster Elite Series. And Jacopo was one of those guys that came, in his case, from Italy and, through the nation, the Federation Nation at the time, and had this opportunity to fish in the United States, wanting to live the bass fishing dream. And Aaron, he reached a pinnacle goal of his for sure on the Potomac River.
And Kurt, let's spend just a brief moment on that. All of us that fish have to come up with some kind of sacrifice, but yes. I think he takes that to a whole new level with, what he had to go through with all of us obviously faced COVID, but he could not get back into his own country, or if he did, he couldn't leave again, right? So, you're missing Christmases, birthdays, Father's Day, right? With his son, and how he dedicated that win to his son. That's a whole emotional, we talk a lot about the psychological aspect and the emotional component that goes into fishing. I mean, that's a whole different level.
Guy was all in, totally different level as you talk about. I find this kind of humorous, but it really shows. I remember seeing this on the live show. Jacpo mentioned he had been 10 months, a year without having a relationship with a woman. That was
right.
Like his other, way to describe to the audience of his commitment to what he was doing. Like everything he had was going directly into bass fishing, and has been for a good period of time. But specifically through this trial and tribulation of COVID and all these other kinds of things, I mean, he had to be ultra focused. It's all he had to do. And to win a national event on that stage, and the raw emotion. If there was anything that I loved more about the whole thing, outside of just this Italian guy, and I say just this Italian guy, this guy that I know and I've talked to many times, Jacpo, having this moment, but seeing the raw human emotion that he went through when he would catch a fish or feel an emotion or a feeling about what was happening to him in that on television or on live broadcasting in time.
Well, and he even said, Kurt, it wasn't
that's
about
what
the money.
bass fishing.
Oh, absolutely. And I think all of us, that's what we're drawn to, is the fact of it's perhaps less about the dollars. At the end of the day, right, it's still about the Benjamins, because you have to be able to stay out here and do this at you guys' level. But we all know that the intrinsic motivator is just kind of that internal, about testing your inner boundaries, your inner limits of how good can we really be in a particular moment. And I think he certainly got to realize that. Yeah, man, it was super, super cool. So without further ado, congratulations again to Jacpo. Great deal. We were going to talk about a little high water, Aaron, but I think we're going to hold off on that. Maybe we can tackle a couple of different scenarios next episode. Maybe we would talk about some high water situations that we've seen over the last month or so. And then also want to talk a little bit about how ecosystems change. But we're going to hold those thoughts. I think we're going to do those in a couple weeks in our next episode, because we have on the line part of this classic event that we just saw, the runner-up. We're going to talk with Matt Arey in the Lucas Oil Angler Spotlight. Y'all stay tuned. This is going to be a great interview.
I am BASS Elite Series Pro Chad Pipkins.
This is Bassmaster Classic champion Casey Ashley.
I am Marcus Sikora, FLW All-American champion.
This is FLW Tour champion JT Kenny, and be sure to stay tuned right here to BassEdge Radio.
You know the importance of protecting your investments, so why use anything else other than the original and toughest DIY keel protector for your boat, Megaware KeelGuard. Grinding sand, abrasive rocks, and concrete ramps are no match for our exclusive contoured edge and patented technology. Megaware KeelGuard keel protectors are made tough and made to stick. Their do-it-yourself installation takes less than an hour, providing the longest-lasting, most dependable keel protection for your boat, guaranteed for life. Developed specifically by boat builders offering the best keel protection in the industry. Also from Megaware KeelGuard, Skeg Guard, Flex Step Pro, and Pontoon Guard. So give your boat the performance edge. Put on the protection the pros pick. Megaware KeelGuard.
Here we go, BassEdge Nation. We have BASS Elite Angler with us today that just came off a great run at the 2021 Bassmaster Classic. When the weight settled and the scales ended, he was the runner-up. It is great to have on today's show BASS Elite Series Angler, Matt Arey. Appreciate you joining us on this episode of BassEdge Radio, Matt.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Well, Matt, like Kurt said, well done at the Classic. So close, yet I'm sure it has provided some great momentum going into the last couple of events of 2021 on the Elite Series. But before we kind of get into that, normally you're kind of on the other side of the mic, right? You're in Kurt and I's position because you and Brian Thrift have a podcast. Is it a little different being interrogated by us this time versus you kind of hosting the show?
Well, it's a lot of fun, honestly. I'm a fan of our industry. I'm a fan of all the podcasts out there, and I listen to you guys. We're full-time truck drivers and part-time fishermen, right? So we spend a lot of time on the road listening to podcasts and things like that. But Brian and I, we have a lot of fun. It's called Let's Talk Fish. We do it live in studio here in Shelby, and we do a lot of engagement. We do tournament wrap-ups. We haven't had as many episodes as I've liked this year because he's over the BPT, I'm over at the Elites, and with so many conflicts in our schedule, it's hard to get together. So we're fortunate to have a lot of good fishermen in our area. We had Hank Cherry on this past Wednesday, and that was a lot of fun to get him in studio. And some people were like, I can't believe you had the guy that put you in second place in the Classic and you sit right there in the studio 3 days later. And I said, well, no, we go way back. We're buddies. But no, we have a good time with it. It's a lot of fun.
Matt, it is a lot of fun. I really enjoy the podcasting, obviously. Aaron mentioned, getting some great momentum going into these last couple of events off of that Classic. What's your thought process? You have 2 or 3 events left there on the Elite Series. Is that correct? I know you got Champlain coming up in a couple weeks, and then you've got Thousand Islands. And is that event still in place right now?
Yeah, that's it. And, Lord willing, everything. Actually, we were under still some pretty strict COVID protocols to go to New York, and those have been lifted. We just got an update from Bass that those have been lifted, so there's not going to be any testing required like there was last year when we went up there, and obviously a lot of the guys are happy about that. But we have 2 events left. Back-to-back events, both in New York, both at Champlain and, yes, St. Lawrence River, Thousand Islands. As of right now, today, Canadian waters on St. Lawrence won't be open to us, but they opened the lake up. Now, that being said, we're going out of Waddington, so it's a long run to that lake.
Yeah, yes, it is.
There's a lot of variables. To answer your question on the momentum side, I'm sitting 40th in the points going into
I saw that on the bubble right now, right?
Yeah, and after you've been I've been over the Elites 2 years, been fortunate to make the Classic both years, and when you're at the Classic, especially when you get that close, there's nothing you want more than just to have another shot. So momentum in our sport, as y'all know, is crucial, and that is something that we're carrying into New York, and we're going to keep a positive attitude. I love fishing up there. I love chasing those big brown fish, and hopefully we can finish off the season strong and get back to Lake Hartwell next year for the 22 Classic.
That'll be great right there, close to your backyard. I know it's not right in the backyard, but it's pretty close. Let's break down some of the early summer conditions we saw over there at the Classic on Ray Roberts. Your approach to make them work for you, your primary baits, a frog and a jig. You had a lot of variables going into this Classic. I don't know if you pre-practiced, but then obviously conditions during the tournament, very different. How did the conditions change in the approach to your Classic, and did your predicted patterns hold true throughout practice and competition this year?
Yeah, one thing, and you mentioned about pre-practice, I did not spend any pre-practice down. We have that 3-day, what I consider pre-practice period, but I didn't spend any pre-practice down there, and that's something that I kind of quit doing about 10 years ago. And, I'm not going to say it's good or bad. It works for some guys. It doesn't work for others. You do what's best for you. But I like to fish by the seat of my pants. I like to pattern fish. I like to kind of follow the current conditions and follow the fish. But, that was Mother Nature, and nothing different than we've seen all year, threw another curveball. And as opposed to normal water levels, when we got there, the lake was about 3 feet high. Now, that being said, it had been 3 feet high for a good week before we got there. So the water was semi-stable. It's still slightly rising, but I was trying to figure out how fast can this lake drop? How fast can this lake rise? Because all lakes are different, right? Sure. And that lake, we had about 3 or 4 inches of rain on Monday, which was the Monday after our 3-day pre-practice period. And that was the Monday before the Classic started. So when we had that rain, the lake started creeping up just a little bit. And but there again, it was 4 or 5 more inches throughout the entire week and all the way through the end of the Classic. So I would consider it fairly stable, comparatively speaking, to what we've seen, say, at Pickwick earlier this year and things like that, where it comes up 6 feet overnight. So when I first got there and I saw the lake was high and I saw it had been high, I like to look at those historical charts on water levels and things like that. Anywhere I've been in the Southeast, first week of June, high water, you have buckbrush and willows that have 2 or 3 foot of water on them. There's going to be fish there. Now, the question in my mind was, are the right fish there. I can get bit, but I'm here to win. I got to make sure that this Ray Roberts caliber, these giant fish that we hear about, are actually up there, and we're able to catch or have an opportunity to catch the ones that we need to make a run at the Classic. And first day of practice, first 2.5 hours, I caught a 4-pounder and an 8-pounder. And that was
right size.
Enough for me. Yeah, that was enough for me to say, look, if I can just generate enough bites and, doing frogging and, throwing a frog and flipping a 1/2 ounce jig, you don't have to generate 25, 30 bites a day. You got to generate 8 to 12 on a lake with that caliber of fish. And that was my goal going into the event. And that's kind of what I ran with throughout the whole tournament. Now, I did have to make some adjustments based on pressure, based on how other guys were approaching it, because it wasn't the 54 guys in this Classic, but y'all know and I know that those guys are good, and they're going to find all the same stuff. So when they're beating the lake up like that, especially when those fish are shallow, I had a milk run of stuff that I could somewhat monitor visually, which was good. I could see different areas across the lake, across the creek, whatever it may be, how guys were fishing it and how many guys were fishing it. So I tried to keep an eye on that. And then I tried to adjust my approach throughout the event based on what I've seen and what I know was being caught from those areas and things like that. But yeah, I stuck with the jig and the frog. The frog didn't develop for me better until after that big storm we had on day 2. And then I was able to carry the frog over into the final day and generate some bites on it. So
Matt, let's run with a couple of your points there. It's quite often, honestly, that we get the question from anglers, where do you start? It's probably one of the most intriguing questions for an angler when they begin their fishing day on any body of water. And, here we are, early July. What can you kind of share with, just in your experience for July, where anglers should start when they hit the body of the water? Because much like what you were talking about and referencing in your Classic practice, you're not one of those guys that likes to put in all this, time in advance, right? And a lot of us in this day and age, we only get so many days off. So it might be our one Saturday, right, to where we have to show up on a body of water and try to catch a fish. What advice can you give them?
Well, if a guy's got the electronic capability now, I would, if we're talking July, I would definitely spend some time looking offshore. One thing I like to do when I get to a new body of water, and this may not be applicable at every body of water just because the sheer size of some of them, but you take Ray Roberts, for instance, 20-something thousand acres, not that big of a lake comparatively speaking. So I like to ride the whole lake. I like to look and see what the lake has to offer. I like to look at watercolors. I like to look at, shoreline cover. I like to look at offshore structure. So it's just to see what it has to offer. And I'm not talking about graphing the whole lake and things like that, but visually seeing everything and the way the lake lays out. Now, I'll do my Google Earth research and things like that, but I like to see what there is. That way, when I do get a bite or two and I start to try to duplicate that or run a pattern, I kind of know how everything sets up, and I kind of have my options laid out for me in the back of my mind to say, I know where some more of this stuff is, So, if you've got the electronics, I would definitely spend some time offshore. I'd look at any of those main lake points, main lake humps that connect to the main river channels, mouths of the major feeder creeks that dump into the main river channels. Those tend to be community holes nowadays, but they hold a lot of fish for a reason. But those little places and those little turns and things at the mouths of your major creeks where they dump in the main river channel, that's a lot of summertime haunts for big schools of bass, especially on any of your Tennessee River lakes and things like that. So I like to see what the lake has to offer, but there again, if I've got the electronics, I'll spend a lot of time graphing in some of those high percentage areas.
Matt, that was really detailed. Really love how you approach that. When conditions of early summer, right? I mean, like up north right now, you still have early summer conditions. Obviously, even though it's July, folks in Georgia and Alabama are like early summer blah, we're all offshore, or current related at the very best to, find some shallow fish, maybe, at least quantities of them. There's always shallow fish, singles here and there. And a lot of guys do good fishing that way, in the midsummer and even late summer. But when you're looking at that early summer to midsummer shift, are you kind of one of those guys that likes to stay shallow as long as you can and then kind of move offshore? Or how do you break down that seasonal behavior pattern shift once it occurs? And what are you seeing to help you design that strategy to move from A to B?
Well, it's no secret nowadays that you've got brim beds, all over the Southeast, and they like to do their thing around here. They'll do it in the Carolinas, from late May, early June, all the way through Labor Day. So, some of the biggest fish in the lake are big nomads that roam shallow year round, or at least all through the summer. And they're chasing bluegill and crawdads and things like that. But the problem with that from a tournament approach is that, those fish, they get picked off and then they become very fickle. They become hard to catch. They get a lot of pressure from the regular weekend angler too, that doesn't have all the fancy electronics to get off the bank chase those big schools. So I do like to target those fish quite often, but I like to use them, as an option to boost my bag. If I can find offshore schools of fish or brush pile fish or things like that where I feel like larger groups of fish are located, I'd like to try to get what I can and then bounce back and forth, shallow to deep, try to get a big bite.
Makes perfect sense. Guys, we're going to take a quick break as we collect our thoughts on summer fishing patterns. Let's power pole down. BassEdge will return with more bass and insights with BASS Elite Series angler Matt Arey.
Patented in 2000, perfected over years of testing and real-world punishment, the Power Pole is the ultimate shallow water boat positioning tool. Swift. Power Pole deploys in seconds from anywhere in your boat. Virtually silent, Power Pole won't spook wary fish. Secure in strong current or gusting winds in up to 8 feet of water. Engineered to take it with a lifetime unconditional replacement guarantee on the spike. Power Pole, swift, silent, secure. Visit powerpole.com to find a dealer near you.
BassEdge Radio is presented in part by Mercury Marine. Returns with BASS Elite Series Pro Matt Arey and the Lucas Oil Spotlight. That's right, Lucas Oil High Performance Marine Products. Be sure to visit the BassEdge.com store for free shipping. It works.
Matt, we left some discussions on midsummer bass, and let's jump right back into it with some tactics for better quality fish during this time of year. You talked really about a two-pronged approach, getting clued in maybe to keepers to fill those tournament limits. Potentially that might be out deep a little bit more to find bigger schools of fish. You talked about, singletons, maybe some of the bigger nomadic fish. You talked about being up shallow during that midsummer time frame. What are ways you're going to target these fish to get better quality bites?
As far as the shallow fish are concerned, there's a couple different baits that I'll keep on my deck. And typically I'll have some type of prop bait, that resembles a bluegill. Then I like the Lunker Hunt compact frog, typically in more of a bluegill type pattern. So a frog and a prop bait are my two top waters that I'm using when I go shallow to target those bigger fish, especially around the brim beds and things like that. And then I'll have a wacky rig lunker stick. It's a 5-inch stick bait, watermelon red. If the water's fairly clear, that's kind of my two-prong approach when I target those big shallow fish. And some of those fish, when they get fickle and they'll kind of wake or they'll just swirl on their top waters, you can pick up that wacky worm and follow it up and catch a lot of those big fish too. So those are the 2 or 3 baits that I have on my deck when I'm targeting those big shallow water fish.
Gotcha.
Man, I want to expand on kind of a concept and really pick your brain. And Kurt, feel free to jump in here on this as well. We hear often talking about catching a bigger fish. And you ask 5 anglers, right? You're probably going to get 5 different responses. But, man, in your opinion, what goes into actually being able to attract and then boat a larger than average fish in the summertime and attracting those quality bites?
Well, the biggest fish in the lake to me aren't necessarily in those big schools. A lot of those fish, they live in kind of isolated places. Now, it makes sense on where they live because it's either a good ambush point or there's some bigger forage available, like your bluegill or some big white bass or even crappies or whatever the lake has to offer. But, bait changes, the way you approach different places, they're, again, making adjustments on where you fish. If I wanted to go out there, take the guys in California, for example, perfect example. I mean, there's guys out there that go to the lake every day with 2 rods. They got a 12-inch swim bait and a 10-inch swim bait.
And a tennis shoe.
Yeah, and a tennis shoe. Yeah, they throw in hubcaps and stuff out there with hooks hanging off of them. But no, they're literally trying to catch one bass each time they go. And, these are 8 to 12 pounders these guys are targeting. They're throwing giant baits. They understand the risk-reward factor, but that they don't care because that's what they're out there to do. Now, that being said, we're not necessarily doing that. We're not to that extreme. But, I may be throwing a 10.5, 12-inch worm offshore. I may be running isolated brush piles that are just in oddball places that might hold, 1 or 2 bites, but they're going to be the right kind of bites. I may be running brim beds with a frog. That'll get an above average bite typically. There's several different ways to target those bigger fish. And there's a lot of different techniques. When you're fishing offshore, that Magnum spoon that we've seen, come about in the last few years is a great way to target big fish. Now, there again,
kind of like the flutter spoon. Is that what you're talking about, Matt?
Yeah, the big giant Magnum spoons. Yeah, they're like 8-inch or 10-inch spoons.
Ben Parker was big on that one.
That's right. I think that's who made the first one.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, there's bait changes, location adjustments to target bigger fish because to me, and it's always been this way to me, to go out and catch 5 big big ones is a heck of a lot harder than catching 50 little ones. That is what I strive to do each time I go out on the water. I'm not a guy, I mean, yeah, we all like to get our string stretched. And when we take the kids, that's a lot of fun to go out there and catch 20 or 30 pound and a half, 2 pounders, you know. But to go out there and catch 5 pounders, 5 6 pounders, 5 7 pounders, depending on where you are, you know, anywhere you go in the Southeast, typically 20 pounds this time of year is a heck of a challenge. That's what's so intriguing to me about it, because a lot of those big fish live in those oddball places. Sometimes they're harder to find, and they're definitely harder to make bite.
Matt, you know, you lead me into another thought process. And you mentioned earlier when we talked about the Classic in the first part of the interview, looking for those quality bites, you needed to win that particular event. And you had some early bites, an 8 pounder, I think you said a 4 pounder, and really let you know that what your initial strategic design was to do well in that event, up shallow and in the bushes and stuff like that, was a way to go to get that better quality bite. From a tournament perspective, you know, obviously venues play a big role, you know, in what is a quality fish and what isn't a quality bass on a particular lake. And that'll change from, you know, you go to Champlain, a 4 pounder is a good quality smallmouth, and 3.5 pounders are good quality smallmouth. But if you go to Thousand Islands, you need 4.5 pounders. You know,
right.
It's a little bit different, right? And it's all in perspective. And you can take those same ideas with lakes down the Southeast. If you're at Santee versus Norman, right? I mean, totally different size and quality of fish, but you know, fisheries that are close. And anyway, long story short is, from a tournament perspective, I want to get your view on targeting keeper bites when you arrive to a venue, or are you just right out of the gate always trying to dial in how to get a better average quality bite when you hit the lake?
Well, yeah, so that's a funny question, because when you're at the Classic, I'm immediately trying to generate big bites because I'm there to win, and points aren't an option. Now, back up and go to a regular Elite Series tournament throughout the season where AOI points are on the line. I've got to get my 5s. I've got to get my 5 every time. Now, it needs to be a competitive 5. So you can't just go get 5 keepers. Take Champlain, for instance. You know, I think a keeper up there's 12 or 14 inches, or St. Lawrence River, it's like 14 inches. You know, those 5 of those, we both know is not going to do any good. So you do have to target, you know, those above average keeper size fish. But I do like to get 5 in the box. I'm one of those guys that fishes a lot better with 5 in the box. And then, you know, depending on the fishery, I'll take some more risks and kind of expand and try to do some different things like we were talking about earlier, you know, trying to hit some more isolated areas with some bigger baits, things like that, to try to catch, you know, 5, 6, 7 pounder, whatever it may be, to up my weight. But in those regular season events, you know, I'm trying to get a good solid limit in the boat before I start getting a little wild and crazy. You know what I mean? So,
Sure.
Yeah, you know, and then when you go to somewhere like the Classic, and you know you're there for one reason, and that's to try to win the Classic, you know, right off the bat, I'm trying to target the 5 biggest fish in the lake because you just want to win.
Makes sense. Now, you've had a very, very consistent career. You take some anglers out there, you just throw a couple of your thrifts, right? And you throw a name like Jason Christie or Greg Hackney. Do you feel like some of those guys that are consistently having top 10s and really, really doing exceptionally well, do you feel like they're just techniques that they lean on help them catch a bigger fish, or it's targeting a bigger fish than some of the other techniques that guys might lean on that aren't more applicable to catching larger fish? And do you think that just becomes a style situation where it helps some anglers be a little bit more consistent in the top 10? Or what's your thought process?
No, I definitely think you're right in that it does help some anglers. You know, there's some out there that try to force the same thing everywhere they go because that's their wheelhouse and they just don't want to branch out for whatever reason. Right. But then there's guys like Hackney, for instance. He can make it work. He just seems to make it work just about wherever we've been all year long. You know, I mean, we're at Pickwick and he's flipping it. Well, that's not a good example because I don't think he made the cut in that one. That was one of his weaker finishes. But That being said, you look at where he's at in the AOY standings, and, you know, every tournament this year, he's pretty much had a flipping stick in his hand and he's made it work. Now, what he's so good at doing is finding those isolated, more remote areas and getting away from the crowds and things like that, and looking for fish that are, you know, that aren't targeted quite as much. But then there's some guys out there that, you know, and myself, for example, when I first started fishing professionally, my goal was to obviously make a living in this industry, but make championships. You know, and I was willing right off the bat to learn every technique I could and be open to whatever I needed to do wherever I went at any time. And, you know, I was not one, I don't consider myself super strong at any technique, but I consider myself somebody that can do a little bit of everything, and I'm willing to do a little bit of everything. So, to answer your question, there are some guys that can make that work, but there's very few of them. Most of your best anglers, your AOYs, typically are very versatile anglers who are willing to adapt and adjust wherever they go, and they've got 15, 20 rods on the deck throughout practice and the tournament. But then there's a handful of guys, Denny Brower, who's retired now, but a perfect example, who made a career out of fishing shallow with a big rod in his hand. Tommy Biffle, another one who's made a career out of it. But that's a lot easier said than done.
Do you think that's going away these days? What's your view on trends as far as where the industry is going from a competitive standpoint? Do you feel like the specialist is losing his way a little bit? I mean, you got a couple old school guys hanging on, and I'll throw Hackney in there as one of those old school guys. Even though Jason Christie's not very old, he fishes old school, right?
He does. It's funny you said that, because I was talking about this with Thrift the other day, and what I'm seeing trending, these kids coming out of college, y'all have seen them. They're unbelievable, right? They're super advanced when it comes to the technical side of things, the technology side of things. They've got all the electronics, all the forward-facing sonar, everything they need at a very young age, and they're learning it, and they're studying it, and they're students of the game. And, your Brian News, your Patrick Walters, a lot of young Drew Cooks. There's a lot of kids that fished in college that are now very successful elite pros. But that being said, I feel like it actually helps a guy like Hackney or Christie, the old school guys. And the reason I say that is because every tournament we go to now, especially after Patrick Walters absolutely just waylaid us last fall at Lake Fork out in the timber, guys are having to spend a lot of time in practice using the forward-facing sonar, sitting offshore, looking at things like that, where I actually think it's starting to take some attention away from the bank. And
interesting.
I'm seeing things kind of revert backwards, go backwards. And Thrift, the other day, it's funny, we were talking about this, and, he had a couple rough events this year. I had a couple rough events this year. And Thrift is a guy who really excels at finding little bitty tiny oddball places off the bank and has them all to himself, and he ends up using those to supplement his tournament, and he ends up winning events because of these little places that he finds, right? But those events that he didn't excel in were, I hate to use the term bang beater events, but they were events to where the shallow water guys shine. And that is a perfect example of things kind of going back, because with the advancement in electronics, I think it's making our fish off the bank even harder to catch. These are fish that never got any pressure in the past. These are fish that never had a hook in their mouth for 2 or 3 months out of the year. And I believe that in a lot of these fisheries. But now, because they're getting pressured, I think it's guys to get a little bit more of the shallow water to themselves and have an opportunity to win tournaments again, 3 or 4 day events, actually shallow.
Right. What's your opinion? I'm throwing a, oddball question out there, because we started talking about electronics, and it's been a hot topic here on BassEdge and many other podcasts and within the industry. Obviously, the forward-facing sonar, it's becoming more and more apt for guys using this, specifically in the professional level, even in really shallow water situations, to be able to take advantage of that forward-facing sonar. How far is this developed for you, and how much time are you spending looking at your forward-facing sonar constantly out there? It almost becomes a game of, it's just a young man's, kind of this new generation of phones and everything else with electronics that we see, and how people relate to their lives are now relating that to bass fishing. And it's almost like we're having to stare at that forward-facing sonar a lot. How has that developed for you, and what's your thought process in that? Specifically, not just in deep water, but shallow water as well.
Yeah, it's kind of two-sided for me, because I run Lowrance, I run the Active Target, and it's phenomenal. It really is. What you see with these electronics now, well, actually, it can do one of two things. It can make your tournament, or it can absolutely drive you insane. And I say that because you almost can get addicted to it. You made the reference to video games, and it's almost addictive. You get up there and you get to seeing these fish, and you get to see them follow your bait. You get to see them react and do this and do that. And it is addictive, but it can get you in trouble at the same time. I think there's a fine line on figuring out when to say when. I have seen guys become so addicted to that thing that they spend too much time on it, And I try to find that happy medium when I'm practicing. And, I've got to kind of, experiment with a little bit of everything and try to figure out what the deal is pretty quickly. We have 3 days to break it down. So it's definitely, and I hate to use this term, but it's definitely a game changer in the industry.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot of the outcomes of a lot of the tournaments over the last couple of years. And, it will continue to do so. But I use it carefully. I use it cautiously because there again, you can end up wasting 30, 45 minutes trying to catch fish off that thing that even though you can see them, even though they might follow your bait, they're still uncatchable, so,
Right.
It can definitely get you in trouble, but it's definitely something that I have to utilize each and every tournament, no matter where we are. I have to kind of sample it during practice and see what I think, the capabilities are moving through the tournament.
I feel like I need another set of eyeballs. I need 4 eyes instead of 2 because I need 2 to keep looking ahead and see and I need 2 more to just stare at that unit. And it's a tough contrast. And there's certainly times when obviously we've seen Spencer Sheffield dominate with it last year. I mean, we saw Walters dominate with it in an event last year and several examples of those types of things happening. And,
Matt, I like your point
struggle.
To where you said, it's kind of bittersweet. It's almost kind of a lame analogy. But it's like if cameras were so great, we would catch all the bank robbers, right? They're going to sometimes up and catch them, sometimes they're not. That's the end of the day.
I tell you, Jeff Gustafson, the Canadian that fishes with us on tour, sponsored by Aquaview, the underwater cameras.
Yeah.
And, you talk about a heartbreaker. You take that thing to St. Lawrence River, Champlain, or St. Clair or something, and you drop it down and you see 25 pounds on these rock piles and you can't catch them. You talk about driving yourself crazy. I don't know which one's worse.
Welcome to my world.
Target, at least you say, at least with the active target, you can say, that's not a bad.
Yeah, it's a spoonbill.
You drop the camera
They're
down
drum.
and you're looking at a 5-pounder dead in the eye and you're dropping your worm and he just swims away from it. And then you're like, that sucks.
Right. And that's what last year at Arey, I remember, obviously active target was becoming a big player and live scope obviously as well. And all the forward facing stuff that's out there. And really now you're being able to watch those fish. You're able to detect behavioral differences and really tell, okay, well, I know that's a drum because this is the way it's acting, or I know this is a smallmouth because it's the way it's acting. And then, being able to target specific species just based on behavioral stuff and the way it moves and the way you see it on active target. I mean, who knows where this thing is going, but it's a wild game.
Oh, yeah. In the next couple of years, those fish that were, like you said, Kurt, if you have a lot of experience with it, you can kind of identify the species. You can somewhat identify the size. Shoot, it may say largemouth bass on it here in a couple of years and tell you the weight and probably tell you, hey, throw a chartreuse 7-inch ribbon tail, wind it slow and hold on.
We'll be using it as a color selector all at the same time.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. That's right.
That's fantastic. All right, guys, we're going to get into the listener questions segment brought to the program by Nitro Performance Bass Boats. This question was sent in by Reese Carmichael from Illinois. Reese asks, I'm looking to invest in my first electronic fish finder, but I'm on a fairly limited budget. What electronic needs do you consider a must-have to improve number and quality of fish being caught?
So, obviously forward-facing sonar is expensive and you have to use that to supplement another unit. Now, that being said, Lowrance has a series called the Elite FS series, and they have an FS7, they have an FS9. Both those units are well under $1,000. You can actually get the 3-in-1 transducer with either one of those units, and that will give you, you'll have GPS, you'll have 2D sonar, you'll have side imaging, and you'll have down imaging. So and those units are compatible with the active target, so you can later add that when the budget allows. So those units anywhere from $600 to $800 with the 3-in-1 transducer, and that will give you kind of everything you need to get going and be able to scan offshore and see brush piles and see fish clearly. And then if you're able, you can add the active target later on down the road. But the FS series from Lowrance, they have a 7-inch, they have a 9-inch. Both great units and like I said, well under $1,000 to get into one of those.
Hey, I was just going to ask you guys to speak just briefly on the updates, making sure the importance of keeping, software updates and stuff like that. It's all done wirelessly practically now, but I think that's something that can often be overlooked as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You can go to Lowrance's website, and the updates are always there. They're always available to download on a card, and then you can upload them into your unit. So staying up to date is very important. You know, those updates, they do them for a lot of different reasons, where there's little bitty bugs in the system somewhere, or just updating internal maps, updating, you know, all kinds of different features. So, you know, definitely staying up to date with all that stuff is extremely important for your unit.
Right. Matt, would you agree? And this is just my thought process. Wanted to get your opinion on it. Still, maybe the most basic fundamental items you need is water temperature and depth. Those two things are going to help anybody catch more fish and maybe improve their quality, because water temperature is going to give you seasonal behavior pattern information. You know, if it's 56 or 61 or 72, big differences in what that tells you the potential predominant seasonal behavior pattern is on a particular lake. And then, of course, the depth, whether it's 5 feet or you see a little drop that goes from 5 to 10 or something of that nature. Those two, would you agree those are still the most needed basic functions, or do you think now a newer technology trumps those?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say, you know, side imaging or forward-facing sonar doesn't trump that, because, you know, water temps, 2D sonar, basic water depths and things like that, obviously those are extremely important. Being able to see 80 feet, 100 feet out to the side of your boat, all that cuts down on your time. So those are just additions to, you know, the basic things that you're mentioning there. But I do think those are still very, very critical in being able to kind of assess the current situation on any body of water.
Cool.
Good stuff. Matt, certainly appreciate you taking that question. Reese, one more thing that we need from you, and that is to be sure to visit BassEdge.com. Click on the Claim Your Prize tab, or email us at support@BassEdge.com, letting us know that you heard Matt answer your question right here on episode 355, and we will get the BassEdge gift sent directly to you.
And as a reminder, continue to fire in those questions at the show, man. We appreciate all the feedback we're getting from the listeners. You can do that on the website, BassEdge.com. Simply push the Ask the Pros tab. Hopefully we'll get your question answered here on the show. You can also email us, as Aaron mentioned earlier, support@BassEdge.com, or leave us a comment on our Facebook or Instagram media pages.
Well, Matt, what a just chock full of great information from A to Z. Really appreciate you carving out time in your busy schedule. Just curious, do you have any closing thoughts or remarks for BassEdge Nation as we begin to shut down?
Man, you know, I tell everybody the same thing as far as when you go to a new body of water. I know that's kind of been a hot topic this show, but, you know, always keep an open mind. You know, the biggest mistake I see a lot of weekend anglers make is they go out there on a Sunday before or Saturday before, and they caught 17 bass out of so-and-so brush pile on so-and-so point, and they want to go back to the same spot and do the same thing. Keep an open mind, have you several different techniques available, and go out there and don't get stuck on what you did yesterday. As you know, y'all know, and I know fishing can change every 30 minutes, much less over a week. Right. So, always keep an open mind and be willing to change on the fly. But, you know, I appreciate you guys having me very much. And guys, you can find Brian and I's podcast on Facebook at Let's Talk Fish Live, and it's a lot of fun. Everybody join in when they get a chance. And of course, my social pages are Matt Arey Fishing across the board on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So if you got a question for me, hey, just shoot me a message, and I'll typically get back to everybody within a day. Yeah, Matt, it's great stuff, man. Appreciate all you do in the industry, and enjoy following you out there on the Elite Series. Been great chatting with you here on the show. Best of luck, man, the remainder of this year. Hopefully you ride that Classic momentum right into Classic 2022 over there at Lake Hartwell, man. It'd be great to see you fishing close to home and have another shot at it. So close this time. I know you're itching to get back and make that happen. We're going to get after it. I appreciate it. You bet. All right, Bass Edge will be right back with Aaron and my closing thoughts right after this message.
You know the importance of protecting your investments, so why use anything else other than the original and toughest DIY keel protector for your boat, Megaware KeelGuard. Grinding sand, abrasive rocks, and concrete ramps are no match for our exclusive contoured edge and patented technology. Megaware KeelGuard keel protectors are made tough and made to stick. Their do-it-yourself installation takes less than an hour, providing the longest-lasting, most dependable keel protection for your boat, guaranteed for life. Developed specifically by boat builders offering the best keel protection in the industry. Also from Megaware KeelGuard, Skeg Guard, Flex Step Pro, and Pontoon Guard. So give your boat the performance edge. Put on the protection the pros pick. Megaware KeelGuard.
The PowerPole Charge Marine Power Management Station is the most advanced system of its kind available on the market. It does the work of 3 devices, a traditional battery charger, a charge on the run, and an emergency start system, all in one compact unit. The Charge lets you run your boat's accessories the way you want to run them by allowing you to monitor and control your power usage through the PowerPole app. It automatically devotes power to the batteries that need it the most for maximum efficiency. The new Charge from PowerPole. Power where you need it, power how you need it, power when you need it.
Be at home with nature-inspired art, decor, and gifts by Wild Wings at wildwings.com. Explore art prints and canvas wraps of bass, trout, walleye, muskie, and more by acclaimed artists like Mark Cicino.
I primarily paint underwater scenes of game fish, and usually in a fishing situation, going after prey or going after a lure or a fly. I get asked sometimes whether I like fishing better or artwork. It would be tough to give either of them up. I can't really think of a good reason to give either up, so I'm going to stick with them.
Make your home, office, or cabin show off your passion for angling. Visit wildwings.com/BassEdge and sign up for an exclusive offer to BassEdge listeners of 10% off your next order. Give something special to your loved one and be at home with nature. Visit wildwings.com/BassEdge. That's wildwings.com/BassEdge to get 10% off your next order of nature-inspired art, decor, and gifts by Wild Wings.
Kurt, enjoyed Matt's topics. Certainly a lot of them, his classic recap. I liked his electronics, discussion, but really just a lot of information crammed in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I think probably one of the most interesting things about Matt's interview was his, I'm going to say, dedication to being versatile. I mean, so many times now we hear about this is a shallow water guy, or this is a deep water guy, or this is a finesse guy, or this is a power fishing guy. And they try to excel at something particular, very specific. And Matt started his career, he stated in the interview, wanting to be able to be diversified because, his goal was making championships. That's what he wanted to do because he felt like that was the best way to make a living in the game. And his diversification is very evident, even in his discussion about how he started strategically with the Classic, then about how he tackles this kind of July time frame of bass fishing. It's not just one dimensional. He's looking for a type and style of fish up shallow, and he's looking for a type and behavioral style of fish out deep. And very compelling. What's compelling mostly is that, Aaron, there is no one way to make this thing work for people. You have to dial in your identity. We haven't talked about that in a long time, but angler identity, super important.
Very important. And I guess too selfishly, Kurt, if there was one cut and dry way to do this, we would not be 355 episodes into this. So it would have been a very short conversation. But
we're always looking for that answer, right? Like, where do I fit in? And it's almost, if you're looking for it, you're never going to find it. You have to naturally evolve into that. But understanding these different nuances from people that have such great experiences like Matt Arey and all of our guests through 350 plus episodes here on BassEdge Radio can help you develop your expertise and skill level to be a successful bass angler. And I guess that's the most part of it.
No doubt. It's, the futile search for the holy grail in the sport of fishing. So perhaps it does exist. Who knows? But I tell you what does exist, and that is the hard close that we've got to get to. Want to thank all of our BassEdge listeners and BassEdge Nation for sending in the questions. Keep those coming. Appreciate you guys tuning us in. As we've said many, many times, many choices out there. Certainly appreciate your time with us. For all things BassEdge, BassEdge.com, all of our social media. And don't forget, again, we are in summer. There is probably, I think, this year a lot more boat traffic just because of people are getting out and enjoying the outdoors. And sunscreen, life jackets, safety first. So for Kurt Dove and the rest of the BassEdge crew, I am Aaron Martin, and we look forward to seeing you July 15th on episode 356. So long, everybody.
Happy Independence Day.
Yes, happy Independence Day.
The Edge is presented by Megaware KeelGuard. For more information on BassEdge or to shop at the BassEdge online store, visit BassEdge.com. And be sure to join Kurt Dove and Aaron Martin right here on another episode of The Edge, brought to you in part by Nitro Boats, Lucas Oil, ProtectTheHarvest.com, Mercury Marine, PowerPole, and Transport Graphics.